Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next part of my How to Be Job series. And this time, we're going to be looking into one of the newer jobs in all of the Final Fantasy series, the Machinist. Now, the Machinist, or the Gunner, or the Engineer, are still pretty new jobs compared to some of the more classic ones, which isn't too surprising. Seeing how this is named Final Fantasy, the series focuses mostly on weapons such with blades and wands rather than technology, such as with the first few games. But as time goes on and they come out with newer games, magic slowly seems to be giving way to a more technological feel, so that it almost feels like it's natural to have someone who can use a gun in these jobs. As their name suggests, they are well known for their expertise with machines and guns, and they're able to handle different devices to fight in battle. They are known for being able to use both physical and magical attacks, and as such, they specialize in using guns and hitting their opponents from a distance, while also using some kind of debuff or causing elemental damage with magic-infused bullets. However, they sometimes have the same problems as the archer or the bard jobs in that while they have high accuracy, they lack in the attack damage, at least compared to the other jobs such as the monk or the ninja. They are more of the support range classes, and they deal reasonable damage from a safe distance while inflicting ailments such as stun or debuffs. Okay, so right now we're going to be looking back at the series of our major machinists or gunners up to Final Fantasy XIV, and we're going to be starting off the game where the machinist first made its appearance in Final Fantasy IV. So, of course, we are going to be starting off with the master of machines himself, Cid. Cid is a machinist, or as he's known here as simply an engineer, and instead of wielding guns in battle, he wields hammers. And he has the skill to be able to analyze enemy stats and discover weaknesses, which is a classic ability for the jobs that do use guns when they attack. He's a loud and proud old man, and he's not the least bit shy about showing off his skills as an engineer. But he's also a good man who has a strong sense of right and wrong. When the King of Barret started acting differently, he was one of the few people who noticed almost right away, and he decided to hide his ship, the Enterprise, away, and he refused to show it to the king even as he was later imprisoned for treason. After he's freed by Sissel and the party, he joins them after he learns that Rosa was kidnapped. Later on in the game, when they're trying to escape from the underworld, Cid saved the party from falling into the lava, and he closed up the hole with a bomb. He jumps off his airship to protect them, and he gives them the time they need to escape, where they assume that he's dead for a long time after that. But it's later on that we find out that not only did Cid survive, he was safely recovering in the Dwarven Kingdom. Even with his injuries though, he was still able to build an entire fleet of airships, where he led the attack on the Giant of Babel. In fact, in certain versions of the game, Cid actually rejoins the party by this point. And after the final battle, it shows just how much he means to the party when he actually becomes the best man at Sissel and Rosa's wedding. Next up, we have Edgar Ronnie Figaro from Final Fantasy VI. Now, while he doesn't use a gun, instead he uses spears, and he's able to use different commands to attack enemies with different mechanical devices. Now, in our monk video, we talked a little bit about his twin brother Sabin, but here we see just how different the two brothers are. They're almost complete opposites. In contrast to his brother, Edgar is, let's just say, there's no other word for it, he's a ladies' man. He's usually seen hitting on every young woman that he sees, such as with Terra and Silas when he first meets them, and he even showed an interest in Relium before discovering just how young she was. Despite all of that though, he is a fair king, he has a great strategic mind as well as willing to risk daring tactics for the good of the people. He's committed to his responsibilities to his subjects, and he tries to protect them as best he can. And he even insists on paying for his items when he goes into town instead of taking them for free. In some parts of the game, we actually see him comparing himself a lot to his father, who was an amazing king. It was like his idol, like his hero. And he's confessing that sometimes he doubts his ability to be a king. And the idea that maybe his father would be proud of him is always something that's in the back of his mind. After their father died, Sabin decided that he wanted to leave home so that he could become stronger, so that he could protect the kingdom, and he wanted Edgar to come with him. But what Sabin doesn't know is that Edgar really did want to go with him. He wanted to be far away from all these responsibilities, from the corrupted politics, but he knew he couldn't abandon the kingdom either, so he decided to give his brother his freedom. So he exchanged basically his own chance at happiness and freedom so that his brother could have it. In fact, he even flipped a coin to see who would be allowed to leave, and he actually lied to Sabin to who actually lost that coin toss. After that, he created a kind of friendship with the Empire, but was secretly allied with the resistant movement to avenge his family from falling apart because it really was the Empire's fault that his father died. So, acting as a spy isn't something that's new to him. He's actually quite tricky when he wants to be. At one point, he provides a two-faced coin to guarantee that they would win against Setzer and have him almost trick him into helping us. After a year at the end of the world, Figaro Castle was stuck underneath the desert, and Edgar disguised himself as a thief to form a gang to be able to sneak back into the castle and revive it. And Figaro Castle itself is a mechanical marvel in that it's able to move underneath the desert sand, so that should also prove just how amazing a mechanic, like a machinist, that he really is. Another point to prove his mechanical ingenuity. After they were fleeing Kefka's tower, he was saved by his brother from a falling grinder. And as they're fleeing, it shows him just how much he admires his brother's strength and how much he missed them, how much he needs them, and basically they decide that they will rule the kingdom together. They will find a way to be able to live in peace and help Figaro Castle to prosperity. Now moving on to Final Fantasy VII, we actually have several gunners here, such as Palmer, who can fire bullets charged with Mako, and Rufus Shinra uses a shotgun on a couple occasions. But we're going to be focusing more on the two in our party in the forms of Barret and Vincent. We are going to start off with Barret Wallace, who has a machine gun mounted to his arm. Now, he's a brash man with a short temper, and he tends to fire his gun arm into the air whenever he's angry, and he just gets everyone's attention. He's just somebody who really knows how to get people's attention. He's not the subtle type. But we do see that he does have a much softer side, such as when he's with his adopted daughter Marlene, and he tends to describe life with metaphors, almost like a poet. More than once, he has said that he wanted to be the leader of the group, but he eventually comes to the realization that he is not the type of man who is suitable to make these hard choices. He grew up in a coal mining village of Coral, and he had a wife named Maima, who was very ill for a lot of her life. And it's because he wanted to create a better life for her that he decided to support Shinra in building a reactor north of them, with his friend Dwayne. Later on, Barret helps the Turks sneak into the reactor to reclaim it, not knowing who they were. Shinra destroys the reactor and Coral in retaliation, and believing that it was the people there who helped Avalanche take the reactor. That was when Barret and Dwayne were pretty much gunned down by Shinra troops, and Dwayne falls off a cliff. As Barret tries to pull him back over the edge, both of their hands were shot, and Barret accidentally dropped Dwayne, and basically he thought that he was dead at that moment. After discovering that his wife was also killed, he pretty much fell into a deep spiral of despair, at least until he discovered that Dwayne's daughter Marlene survived the attack. So he decided to take her away from all of this chaos and raise her as his own. Later on, he ended up getting a prosthetic gun arm before he goes to Midgard with Marlene to begin his campaign against Shinra. His main focus for his actions is to save the planet so that Marlene and the future generation could have something left for them. But he comes to see that fighting may not always be the right action to take, especially after meeting with Dwayne again, and seeing how he had also had a similar gun arm and a thirst for revenge that pretty much drove him to the brink of madness. Barret comes to realize just how scary the idea that revenge could actually drive a person. So he decides to look at life at a different point of view. The second person from this game who relies on guns is Vincent Valentine, a dark and brooding vampire look-alike. He's very cryptic about his past, and while it does seem like he's really cold at times, he does have a kind side to him that he just really doesn't know how to interact with people. He's more of a loner. He's a man of few words, but he's usually seen with a variety of firearms which speak loudly enough for him. Now, years before the start of the game, he was a member of the Turks, and he was assigned to supervise the Genova project, and before he ended up falling in love with Lucretia Crescent. Now, he later discovered that she was actually working on a project of chaos with his father, until he was killed in an accident. Now, Lucretia seems to blame herself for what happened to him, and so that guilt kind of just causes her to push Vincent away, and she ends up marrying Hojo, and they use their unborn son as a test subject who later will grow up to be Sephiroth. Now, Vincent was highly against using their unborn son as a test subject, and he confronted Hojo about this before he ended up getting shot. Hojo then used Vincent's dying body as a test subject for experiments, and eventually he was able to make him a nearly invincible body. Now, Lucretia was desperate to save Vincent, so she decided to use his body as a vessel for chaos, until creating him into an uncontrollable monster in the process. That was when the proto-materia, something that was discovered by Vincent's father, seemed to be able to help Vincent control chaos. So Lucretia ended up putting the proto-materia inside Vincent so that chaos could be controlled, at least to a certain degree. Thanks to all of these experiments and his body becoming a vessel for chaos, Vincent acquired superhuman abilities and pretty much turned him into almost kind of like a monster. At least that's the way he saw himself. So once he awoken and saw what he had become, he decided to lock himself in a coffin where he slept for over 2 decades, constantly reliving his nightmares as punishment for not being able to stop Hojo. Now, after he's found by the party, they talk him into joining them in their journey to help save the world. It's later on that he speaks with Red 13, and he actually confesses that he will always be here for him because he is immortal, or at least as close as immortal as it's possible to be. Later on in the game of Diverge of Cerberus, he confronts the members of Deep Ground, a group of secret experiments from Shinra to be super soldiers, and that's where he discovers more about what Lucretia and Hojo had done to him and more about chaos. Eventually, he was able to speak with Lucretia one last time, who apologized for all the suffering she had caused him, but she explains that she did it because she couldn't bear the thought of letting him die. And she's happy to see that he did survive. And he later learns to control chaos before using all of his powers to defeat Hojo once and for all, while stopping Omega and saving the world for a second time. Wow, so that's a lot to take in, but we are now moving on to Final Fantasy VIII, where we meet with Ivine, who uses shotguns when he attacks. His limit break is known as Shot, and it lets him use different types of ammo to deal damage in different ways. He's also a bit of a ladies' man, much like Edgar, and he tends to try to impress the girls by his loner sharpshooter persona. He was well known for his sharpshooting skills, and that was how he ended up becoming assigned to a dangerous assassination mission. But we later find out in the game that he really doesn't enjoy being a lone sniper because he's felt alone his entire life, and he's considered his friends here in his team as his saviors because they saved him from loneliness. Though he's more cautious than the rest of the group, he's by no means a coward, and he isn't afraid to stand up for his choices. He was an orphan of the Sorceress War, and he lived in an orphanage with Squall, Sylphie, and the others under the care of Ida Kramer before he was later adopted and ended up studying in Galbadia Garden. I think that's mainly the reason why, when he was ordered to fire upon the sorceress, he was able to recognize her as Ida, and he was unable to bring himself to shoot, and that's why he choked. Now, much later on in the game, he's eventually able to remind the others of their history together, how they all grew up at the orphanage, how they all knew each other, and that's when they came to realize that the power of the Guardian Forces comes with the price of their memories. And so they're all shocked when they realize that the woman who took them in and cared for them was actually the sorceress Ida. Now, the reason that Ivern was able to remember all this is because he doesn't rely on the Guardian Force's powers. And so he's able to help play an important role in this, in that he reconnects them to the past and to each other. He then joins them for their final mission to defeat Ultimecia, and he's later seen in the Baliam Garden celebrating with everyone as he returns to what he does best in wooing the ladies. I'm seeing a lot of similarities with this class with each other, but moving on, we have the Gunner dress sphere in Final Fantasy X-2, where all 3 of our main characters are able to tap into, and this is kind of Yuna's default outfit. They are able to use quick and wide-range attacks to fire from a distance, while dealing out different kind of ailments to opponents at the same time. In Final Fantasy XI, we actually have two classes which are sort of machine-based if you think about it. First we have the Puppet Master, and then the Corsair. Now, for the Corsair, they are able to use a variety of guns and even hexagons to deal quick draw damage. In fact, we get the quick draw ability at level 40, which lets us endow our bullets with special effects. Then we have the Puppet Master, which lets us pair with an automaton puppet machine which can fill in many different roles. It's more of a magical based class if you think about it, but I felt it was worth mentioning. Final Fantasy XII, everybody in the party is capable of using a gun thanks to the license board. However, the one we all think of in this game when it comes to guns is Balthier. Now, Balthier is the charming, cunning, and dashing sky pirate who I think stole the hearts of many fangirls. He refers to himself as the leading man, and he proves that despite his self-centered attitude, he trusts in his partner Fran completely, and he's even willing to sacrifice himself for others. He was born the son of Sidolphus Demon Brunanza, also known as Dr. Sid. He was then made into a judge at a young age before fearing that his father was fallen into insanity, and at one point he became too much for him, and he could no longer stand the sight of his father and chose to run away. After he runs away, he chooses to become a sky pirate, and he takes up a new name before meeting and partnering up with a Viera named Fran. Now they spend their days flying the skies of Ivalice and looking for treasure, and he eventually earns a bounty and a reputation as a very imposing sky pirate. At the beginning of the game, he and Fran meet with Van and when they broke into the palace to steal treasure. And that leads to a series of events which lead him back to discover his father's role in the upcoming war, and he feels it's his responsibility to put a stop to him. Balthier comes to realize that he's been running away from his past this whole time, and it's implied in his theatrical personality is kind of a mask for him to hide his vulnerabilities and to cast aside the person he used to be. So he joins the party so that he could finally put an end to all of this with his father, with his past, and basically move on with his life. At the end of the game, he stays behind with Fran to repair the damaged engines and stop Bahamut from falling on the city of Rabanastre. And the two of them are believed to have been killed in the crash for at least a year. At least until they end up stealing back into the city and they take back their airship before leaving behind a note inviting Van and Penella to join them on a treasure hunt. Now the last person we're going to be looking at right here is Sag from Final Fantasy XIII, XIII-2, and XIII-3, Lightning Returns. Now he wields two pistols in battle, which can join together to form an assault rifle. He's one of the most lively characters that we have here in the game, and he's got a good heart, and everything he does to try and protect his son Dodge. He's even willing to sacrifice his own life if it means protecting Dodge from becoming a monster. Now Lightning said it best, he's the type of man who can laugh in the face of any disaster, and the more life-threatening the emergency, the more he jokes about it. After his son was cursed as a lessee, he travels to try and destroy the Pulse Fal'Cie, and so that he could fulfill Dodge's focus and save him. All throughout his journey, he comes to learn that Vanille and Fang were responsible for his son becoming cursed in the first place, and though he has a chance to kill Vanille, he instead learns to forgive her and even tries to take his own life after Dodge becomes a crystal. He's the voice of reason in the party, and he acts as almost a parental figure here. By the time that Lightning returns as the savior in almost 1,000 years into the future, Sag lost most of his cheerfulness, and he becomes bitter and angry when his son falls into a coma. It's not until he realizes that he had changed into a person that even his own son would be afraid of does he return to his old self, and his son awakens. And then the two of them are happily reborn in the new world. Wow, so despite the Machinist still being a relatively new class, we have a lot of gunslingers to look after here. Well, let's look into the abilities we have for the Machinist in Final Fantasy XIV. We first received the Machinist job in the Heavensward expansion. With the Drakensong War continuing, the battling dragoons and knights just can't keep up with it. That's when Ishgard turns to more of the technology to try and protect the city, such as with the cannons and the ballista to line the city walls. The Skysteel Manufactory dabbled a bit in Magitech and have started creating pistols and other guns so that even lowborn who have very little battle experience can bring down dragons. This job is a mobile range DPS class and the gun as their weapon. They deal with range damage and use their firearms enhanced with attachments and mechanical turrets to help out on the battlefield. And their main stat is dexterity, so they equipped the aiming gear, which means that they share their equipment with bards and their accessories with both bards and ninjas for the most part. As for their job gauge, which was introduced in 4.0, they use ammunition gauge and the heat gauge. The ammunition gauge indicates the number of rounds of special ammunition currently loaded in a Machinist firearm. Special ammunition can be loaded to any firearm by executing the action reload. And the heat gauge is displayed upon the execution of an action gauze barrel. When the gauge reaches 100, the firearm becomes overheated, and in that state will deal additional damage but then becomes too hot to use. That's when the gauze barrel is removed and you can't use it until the cooldown. As for the limit breaks, they have the Big Shot and the Desperado, which is shared with the Bard. The Big Shot is the level 1 tier level break, and it deals damage to a line of enemies in front of you. And the same is for Desperado, except it's a little bit more powerful as a level 2. But Satellite Beam actually summons up a massive turret and fires upon all the enemies in down below with a potency of 5,000. As for their abilities, here is a list of some of the most commonly used or most powerful abilities. We have Reload, which loads your firearm with 3 rounds of special ammunition, and it increases the rate of weapon skills effects. It can deliver an attack of a potency of 240 and will hit with a critical hit. And even lowers the heat gauge increase, but you can only use this when your opponent's HP is below 20%. Blank is also a good attack to use when you are first starting off as a Machinist, and for the fact that while it doesn't deal damage, it does knock an opponent back. Again, the Machinist won't deal nearly as much damage as a Monk or a Dragoon would, but it's good to give yourself time if you need it. Don't try using this ability in a dungeon though, your party will yell at you for using it and knocking back the opponent. Spread Shot delivers an attack with a potency of 80 to all enemies in a cone shape in front of you, as well as increases your Spread Shot potency by 25% and increases the heat gauge by 5. Hot Shot attacks with a potency of 120 and increases physical damage by 8% for the next 60 seconds and will increase the heat gauge by 5. Rapid Fire reduces your weapon skills recaster time to 1.5 seconds but ends when you use 3 different weapon skills. We also have 2 different auto turrets. The first is the Rook auto turret, which deploys a small turret where it will auto attack with a potency of 80 to its master's target and increases target damage taken by 6. So it's just like using a summoned Eggy to fight at your side like a summoner. The second turret is the Bishop auto turret, which attacks all enemies in range. However, with every enemy added, its damage potency fades. So let's say that you are fighting off 4 or 5 different monsters at once. The first one will receive the full blunt of your attack. However, while the second enemy will also receive damage, it will be 10% less damage than the first. And then for the third one, it will be 20% less, and then 30% less for the fourth, and so on and so forth. However, it does also increase the target's damage taken by 6%. Best for big pulls, while the Rook is best for the single boss fight. The Gauze Barrel is a very important ability because it equips your firearm with a Gauze Barrel, increasing your damage by 5% and will let you use your heat gauge when it reaches 100%. When the heat gauge reaches 100, your weapon will become overheated and the damage dealt will be increased by 20%. The Gauze Round is one of the most powerful and useful abilities that you can have because it has a potency of 200 and increases damage dealt by 5% for the next 10 seconds. And the Hybrid Charges should only be used when you have auto turrets on the field. It increases its normal attack potency for the next 20 seconds. One of my favorite abilities is the Ricochet, which deals damage to all nearby enemies with a potency of 300. But like with the bishop turret, it will hit all targets in a group, but it will deal less damage the more it goes. Now the heated split shot can only be used with the heat gauge, and it deals an attack of 190 and increases a 50% chance of a slug shot's potency by 130. Basically anything that has heated in its name can be used when you're using the heat gauge, such as the heated slug shot, which attacks with a potency of 100 and increases to a 50% chance of clean shot potency by 140. Now I know that all of this sounds very complicated, but once you get used to the effects, then they do become self-explanatory. If you need to get your heat gauge up fast, the barrel stabilizer will set it up when you have the gauze barrel attached and you're in battle. It will set it up to about 50%, so if you are already at 55% or over, it will reduce it back to 50, that's just a heads up. As for the turrets, these attacks can only be used when you have a turret out. The Rook Overdrive will launch a powerful attack and then be removed from the battle afterwards for repair, so you can't use it for 30 seconds. And the Rook Overlord will only be used if you're under the effect of Rook Overdrive. It will deal an attack with a potency of 800. It's a very strong ability, and so it's well worth the price. As for the Bishop Overdrive, it will do the same as the Rook Overdrive and attack all targets in an area, while the Bishop Overdrive will deal damage with a potency of 600 to all nearby enemies before it leaves the field. And the last ability we will mention here is known as the Flamethrower. It's a very impressive ability, and it deals a heavy amount of damage over time to all enemies in a cone in front of you for the next 10 seconds. But if you move at all, then its effects are going to be cancelled early. Plus, it looks really cool. And now we're going to go into a quick review of the quest for the Machinist. There are going to be spoilers here, so please just skip ahead to the ending if you don't want them ruined. You can unlock the quest to become a Machinist in Ishgard, so you are going to need the Heavensward storyline. Head to the Skysteel Manufactory in Foundation and speak with Stefan Vian. And that's where you start off. It's here that we are introduced to one of the sons of House Helinaut, the elder brother of Francil, a character that we met in the Realm Reborn main scenario questline, and we also are introduced to his assistant Joyce. They had just discovered that their gunslinger teacher Rostenthal had left, and we are asked to accompany them to Limsa and help them find him. When we do track him down, and Stefan Vian confronts Rostenthal on his sudden disappearance and asks him to return. Now at first he refuses, at least until Stefan Vian introduces us to him and asks if he will be willing to teach us. In the end he agrees, but only if we show that we have potential. After a battle with him and seeing how sharpshooting that Joyce is, who seems to almost have a split personality here whenever she uses a gun, he agrees to come back. The next couple of quests are basically us getting to master the art of the Machinist, learning new abilities, and basically testing us and helping Stefan Vian with his new inventions. We come to see just how passionate he is about the art of the Machinist, and he dreams about creating an Ishgard where the highborn and lowborn alike can defend it into a brighter future. Of course, not everyone is in agreement to that, such as Stefan Vian's father, the Count, who doesn't approve of his son spending so much of his time at the manufactory when he should be bringing honor to the family by training for knighthood. When a powerful dragon by the name of Savaya was en route to the Skyfire Locks, a place where the House Helinaut is honor-bound to defend, Stefan Vian promises that he will be able to protect it with his Machinist instead of the knights. So of course we do end up aiding them in defeating Saravea, and at first it looks like we are winning over his father's approval at the potential of what the Machinists have. At least until a high-ranking knight, Lord Telagrinchi, who mocks the Machinist, causing Stefan Vian to turn on him in anger at the insults. And that's when he declares that he's going to enter his Machinist into the upcoming tournament and beat them. So of course his father isn't the least bit happy about this, but he decides to make a deal with his son, saying that he will turn over all control of the manufactory to his care if his Machinists win the tournament. So naturally, when the tournament comes around, we do end up making a show of it and beat the knights. Still, it's not enough for Telagrinchi, who still belittles them despite their victory. Still, it's enough for the Count to hand over all control of the manufactory to his son and earn his trust and respect. Everything seems to be going well for them, at least for the time being. It is not long after that did several bouts of sabotage start causing trouble for the manufactory, and Joyce ended up disappearing for a time, declaring that she had gotten married and was leaving. This causes confusion, and many of the manufactory workers turned on Stephen Vian, and it was a really bad time because the Black Iron Bridge was under attack and we were asked to help defend it. And it all looks really bad because it looks like just about everybody kind of abandoned Stephen Vian, except for us and Rosenthal. At least until we discovered that the reason that Joyce left was because she was forced to leave employment because her father was taken hostage. After we rescue him, Joyce was able to return, and not a moment too soon, because she helps us defend the bridge, and basically everything's starting to return to normal. At least until we start suspecting that it was Tella Grinchy who was the one behind all this sabotage. But without proof, there wasn't much that we can do, especially with the manufactory coming under suspicion of arming the low-born commoners into overtaking the government. With no other option, we are commanded to slay a powerful dragon to prove our innocence. Which is very strange if you ask me. This, however, we take all in stride, and when the day of judgment comes, we stand tall, and we even protect Tella Grinchy in the process before bringing the dragon down. After proving our innocence in the eyes of the Holy See, we are allowed to go, and even Tella Grinchy promises not to interfere with us any longer. With everything going so well, Rosenthal decides that now is a good time for him to go as well, and he decides to leave Joyce in charge as the new instructor. But Rosenthal soon comes back once the events of Stormblood comes around, and we are asked to aid Hilda and her followers into becoming a proper watch for the city. They are eager to prove themselves and earn a little respect from the Highborn, but they need a proper teacher, calling themselves Hilda's Hounds, and we're helping to teach them all about the art of the Machinist when they receive their first commission as a priceless artifact was stolen, and we're forced to work alongside a knight called Sir Muscadane. Even after recovering the sword, we discover that an explosive was implanted inside the blade, which would have been set off to cast doubt upon Sir Emeric's authority and the Hound's competence. The one behind this was a noblewoman by the name of Baroness Merceline, and we join forces with Sir Muscadane to bring her down and restore order. That's where we discovered that Hilda and Muscadane are actually siblings, and they seem to come to a kind of understanding and mutual respect with each other before Rosenthal deems the Hounds capable of going forward without him before leaving Ishgard for a third time. Now for the last part in my predictions as to what we can be expecting for the Machinist in the future expansions. Well, my best bet is that we will be meeting up with Rosenthal at least one more time, and perhaps requesting his aid in teaching once more. Personally, I think it may be more along the lines of him coming to us with his own shady past catching up to him. Also, I would like to look more into the family life for House Hellenart, and even see more of Francil coming back and talking about his friendship with Hoshefont. That would be just beautiful to me. And I would like to see some kind of blooming relationship with Stephen Vian and Joyce. At least that's what I want to see. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the Machinist, also known as the Gunner, Engineer, and many other names. I do hope you all enjoyed it and found it informative, and the next video will be going up as soon as possible. And I hope you all have a good day. Bye.